In the first topic, we explored how spatial resilience forms, how exposure, sensitivity, and adaptive capacity vary across places, and how GIS helps us understand these patterns. Now, we move one step further: how resilience becomes policy and action. Communities today face rapid environmental and social change. To respond effectively, decisions must be grounded in local knowledge, spatial context, and reliable data. This is where GIS becomes essential. It shows where vulnerabilities emerge, where strengths can be leveraged, and how decisions will affect different groups across space. With this clarity, communities can design resilience strategies that are targeted, fair, and realistic. In Topic 2, we focus on how spatial insights guide real policies, how stakeholders use data, maps, and place-based understanding to support stronger, more coordinated resilience efforts. As we begin this topic, it's important to be clear about how we translate spatial resilience into action. Our focus here shifts from technical analysis to how resilience is forged through local knowledge, social capital, and co-design. By the end of this section, you'll be able to explain the role of local knowledge and place attachment as core drivers of long-term resilience, and you'll know how to map social capital and different stakeholder layers to design equitable engagement strategies. Furthermore, you will be able to shift analysis to an asset-based approach by identifying and leveraging community strengths, apply participatory GIS, PGIS, and story mapping to integrate lived experience with technical data. Finally, you will ensure sustainability by utilizing county design, visible accountability, and adaptive M&E principles for performance management. Together, these objectives will give you the foundation needed for transforming spatial analysis into an equitable, place-based, and actionable policy process. Local knowledge. Communities possess unique, hyper-local, and real-time data about risks and assets that official systems often miss. Place attachment. The emotional and cultural bond residents have with specific locations, acting as the most powerful motivator for long-term recovery and protection. Social capital. The networks of relationships, trust, and reciprocity within and between community groups, which determine their capacity to self-organize and respond to shocks. Participatory GIS. A methodology where citizens collaboratively map their lived experiences and local knowledge onto technical base maps, dramatically increasing accuracy and ownership. Asset-based approach. A strategy that deliberately focuses on identifying and leveraging existing community strengths, resources, and capacities before addressing vulnerabilities. County design and accountability. Resilience planning that involves the community in jointly authoring the final action plan, ensuring the plan becomes a visible, living contract rather than an external report. Adaptive monitoring and evaluation. The use of spatial monitoring and evaluation, M&E, systems, e.g., GIS dashboards, to track spatial indicators, providing real-time feedback to adjust policies and investments. Communities detect change years before any official censor. A Philippine fishing village noticed the fish no longer came to the old reef, 3 years before satellite data confirmed coral death. In Alaska, elders reported salmon arriving 2 weeks early. Local authorities listened, adjusted the season with GIS, and saved the fishery. Local knowledge is hyper-local, real-time, and cost-free. Exclude at right-pointing arrow plans lose accuracy and trust. Include at right-pointing arrow analysis becomes sharper and communities truly own the outcome. Next, we'll see proven methods to capture and map this knowledge systematically. Research consistently shows the strongest predictor of whether people will protect a place is not money or regulation. It is how emotionally attached they are to it. In Louisiana after Hurricane Katrina, residents refused to leave neighborhoods with century-old oak trees and family cemeteries, even when offered safer relocation. In Turkey, people rebuilt their villages stone by stone around historic mosques and village squares after the 2023 earthquakes. When policies ignore or damage these bonds, communities resist or abandon projects. When policies explicitly protect and celebrate them, the same oak trees, the same mosque courtyard, participation becomes voluntary and sustained. Place attachment is not sentimentality, it is the most powerful, cost-free motivator we have for long-term resilience. Worldwide evidence is clear. After every disaster, the fastest recovering places are never the richest or the newest. They are the ones where people already trust each other. Kobe 1995, Christchurch 2011, Turkey 2023. Same pattern. Strong neighborhood ties, active village councils, trusted local leaders. These are what get people food, shelter, and hope before any official team arrives. Social capital has 3 layers: bonding within close groups, bridging across between different groups, linking to institutions. Our job is simple: map these invisible networks and design every policy to strengthen them, never to replace them. Because the most resilient infrastructure is not concrete, it is relationships. Every community has places that are untouchable. A 400-year-old plane tree where elders meet, a small mosque that survived 3 earthquakes, a rock where generations proposed marriage. These are not just locations on a map, they are identity itself. Damage them and you damage the very reason people want to stay and rebuild. In Turkey's 2023 earthquakes, villages rebuilt first around historic fountains and graveyards. Everything else came later. In New Orleans, the strongest opposition to post-Katrina plans came when levees threatened centuries-old oak alleys. Lesson: never plan resilience against these symbols, plan with them. Protect one sacred site and you gain the trust and energy of an entire community. Ignore it and no budget or technology will save your project. Experience shows us that even the best-intentioned, well-funded projects can lose community support when local cultural values are unintentionally overlooked. We have seen this when sacred sites are relocated without consultation, when centuries-old trees that serve as gathering places are removed, or when traditional practices are restricted without dialogue. The result is usually the same: people feel disconnected from the project, participation drops, and the initiative struggles to move forward despite its technical merits. These cases are not accusations, they are valuable lessons. They remind us that resilience is most sustainable when it is built together with the community, in full respect of the places and traditions that give meaning to people's lives. By learning from these experiences, we can design approaches that honor culture from the very beginning, and that is exactly what the next slides will show us how to do. For decades we drew maps about communities. Participatory GIS simply says, let's draw them with communities. We give residents base maps, colored pens, or smartphones and ask them to mark what matters: where floods actually enter houses, which wells never dry, which tree is the village meeting point, which path becomes dangerous at night. The result is astonishing. Maps become dramatically more accurate because they contain lived experience, and the moment someone draws their own home on the map, the project is no longer yours, it becomes ours. Studies show participation rates rise from under 20% to over 80% when people literally see themselves on the map. From the next slide onward, we will see concrete tools and step-by-step methods that make this co-creation not just possible, but routine. Mapping stories deliberately overlays rigorous spatial data with lived experience. A satellite image shows flood extent. A 30-second voice note from a resident who has lived there for 50 years reveals hidden flow paths and drainage failures no model can detect. One photograph of children under the village's old plane tree instantly conveys the emotional weight of a social asset. When decision-makers and citizens open the same map and simultaneously see technical evidence and hear an authentic local voice anchored to the same location, the map stops being an external product. It becomes a shared narrative that everyone already feels part of. Research consistently shows that narrative mapping significantly increases community ownership and accelerates political approval. The next slides will show exactly how this bridge from data to action is built. The same spatial evidence can be delivered in 2 formats: a 50-page technical report that rarely leaves the shelf, or a 5-minute narrative presentation that is shared the same day. Experience and evaluation studies consistently confirm that decision-makers allocate budget and political priority far more rapidly when the content is local, visual, and carries authentic community voices. Proven, high-impact formats include short ArcGIS story maps, one-page visual summaries, community-produced videos, and public exhibitions in everyday gathering places. Effective communication is not an add-on. It is the critical mechanism that converts rigorous analysis into funded, supported, and sustained action. The following slides will demonstrate how to make this conversion systematic and routine. Most resilience plans claim to represent the whole community, yet participation often reflects only a narrow demographic. By mapping basic social layers, age, gender, income, tenure, ethnicity, GIS quickly reveals whose voices are missing from the process. Once these gaps are visible, targeted engagement becomes straightforward. Women-only sessions during school hours, youth forums in everyday spaces, weekend meetings for shift workers, home visits for elderly residents, or safe separate circles for renters. Research is clear. Projects that secure representative participation from the outset achieve higher legitimacy, fewer conflicts, and stronger long-term outcomes. Inclusive engagement is not optional, it is the foundation of equitable, sustainable spatial policy. Most vulnerability maps are dominated by shades of red, portraying entire communities as problems to be fixed. The asset-based approach deliberately reverses this perspective. Before identifying any deficits, it first maps and makes visible the strengths that already exist. In practice, this means documenting retired shipbuilders who can repair boats after floods, women who manage community kitchens, teenagers who know every safe shortcut, or centuries-old trees that naturally cool surrounding streets. When these capacities are shown on the map first, communities that were once labeled high risk, low capacity, begin to see themselves not as vulnerable, but as capable, resourceful, and resilient. Longitudinal studies consistently demonstrate that initiatives grounded in documented community assets achieve implementation up to 3 times faster, with maintenance rates exceeding 80% even after external funding ends. Starting with strengths is not optimism, it is a proven, evidence-based pathway to building durable spatial resilience. Traditional resilience planning delivers a finished document to the community. Co-design does the opposite. The community is in the room while every line is written. We begin with the maps they drew themselves, continue with the priorities they ranked together, and end with an action dashboard everyone can read. Who does what, by when, with which budget, and who is accountable. Cultural sites are protected by name, women's groups receive dedicated funding, youth proposals become official pilots. When residents see their own handwriting and signatures on the final plan, ownership becomes visceral. Long-term studies show that jointly authored plans have implementation rates above 90% and survive changes in municipal administration. This is how spatial policy ceases to be a report and becomes a living, community-owned contract. A plan that cannot be seen will soon be forgotten. The most resilient communities do something strikingly simple. They take the final action table and make it physically impossible to ignore. In rural Turkey, the signed plan is laminated and nailed to the mosque wall. In Nepalese villages, it hangs under the sacred peepal tree. In New Orleans neighborhoods, it is painted as a mural on the community center. Every month residents gather, mark completed items with a green tick, add new ones when needed, and take a photo for the WhatsApp group. External funding ends, consultants leave, mayors change. Yet the wall display and the monthly ritual keep the plan alive for decades. This is the final, often overlooked step that separates temporary projects from generational resilience. We have designed the plan together, co-design, and made it visible, accountability wall. But how do we know if it's actually working over time? This is the role of spatial monitoring and evaluation, M&E. GIS is crucial here because resilience doesn't happen in the abstract, it happens in specific places. We need to measure where progress is made and where gaps persist. Tracking indicators. M&E translates policy goals into measurable spatial indicators. For example, instead of a goal like, improve flood management, the indicator becomes the change in flood-prone area coverage in the X neighborhood, measured by satellite imagery and change detection. Performance mapping. We use GIS dashboards to visualize performance. Green areas show where adaptive capacity has demonstrably increased, e.g., more social housing built in safe zones. Red areas highlight systemic failures or where the local environment is still degrading. Adaptive management. This system creates feedback loops. If the data shows that a specific resilience action is not working in its spatial context, we don't wait 5 years for a major review. We use the real-time spatial evidence to adapt the strategy now. As we wrap up this topic, it becomes clear that sustainable natural resource management is no longer just about knowing what is happening in our environment. It's about using that knowledge to make smarter, more responsible decisions. GIS gives us the ability to connect all the pieces, from monitoring change, to planning long-term strategies, to executing operations safely and efficiently in the field. We've seen how planning lets us balance environmental protection, economic needs, and community expectations. And we've seen how real-time operational tools, mobile GIS, dashboards, sensors, and digital twins, turn those plans into action and help organizations stay resilient in the face of constant change. Across every sector we explored, mining, energy systems, pipeline delivery, renewable power, and agriculture, the goal remains the same: reduce risk, protect resources, and build systems that can endure. Ultimately, sustainability becomes achievable when spatial insight turns into practical, measurable action.